You really had the nerve to say freedom looks bad on me with that dirty mouth? Freedom don't need your approval, idiot. What looks bad is a bitter woman clinging to relevance by tearing down another black woman. You sit on that chair acting like the gatekeeper of black excellence, but you sound like the same old system we've been fighting. You ain't the queenmaker, Whoopi. You're just a jealous spectator. Freedom doesn't look bad on me, idiot. It looks unfamiliar to you because you never expected someone like me to wear it better than you ever could. Recently, during a high-stakes, nationally televised broadcast, a tense moment unfolded that left the country buzzing. It was supposed to be a regular political panel, a discussion meant to analyze the state of freedom, democracy, and representation in modern America. But as things often do when fiery personalities collide, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Whoopi Goldberg, an iconic figure in American entertainment and political commentary, stunned the room when she turned to Representative Jasmine Crockett and with piercing condescension said, "Freedom looks bad on you." Those 5 words sparked not only an immediate chill in the room but also a wave of reaction across the country. People held their breath waiting for Jasmine Crockett's reaction. Would she explode? Would she leave? Would she clap back? What followed, however, was neither anger nor theatrics, but a calm, calculated response that turned the entire narrative on its head. Jasmine Crockett didn't just defend herself, she turned Whoopi's words into a national moment of reflection and reckoning, leaving all of America stunned. The silence that followed Whoopi Goldberg's incendiary line was louder than any scream. People leaned in, unsure whether they had heard her correctly. Some squinted at the screen, looking for some sign of humor or irony. There was none. Whoopi's face was stone cold, her tone biting, and her words unmistakable. Jasmine Crockett sat still, her eyes fixed on Whoopi like a laser. For a brief moment, you could feel the heat of the room through the screen. Everyone knew this wasn't just a celebrity outburst, it was something deeper. Whoopi, knowingly or unknowingly, had struck at the heart of something incredibly sensitive. The suggestion that freedom, arguably the most sacred of American ideals, looked bad on a young, black female politician was not just a personal jab. It was historical, it was systemic, and it was ugly. Millions of viewers expected a heated reaction. Instead, they got something much more powerful. Jasmine Crockett took a deep breath. Her composure was unshakable. She leaned forward gently, folded her hands, and spoke slowly but firmly. "I wasn't aware that freedom had a dress code," she said, her voice smooth like velvet but edged with steel. "But I do know it's been denied to women who look like me for generations. Maybe it looks unfamiliar because for the first time, it's real." The room went completely still. Whoopi didn't blink, but everyone else did. Jasmine's words weren't just a comeback, they were a mirror held up to the face of a nation, asking it to take a long, hard look at the hypocrisy of its values. And what made it even more poignant was that Crockett never raised her voice, never made it about ego. She made it about history, about justice, about truth, and that's what shook America to its core. The power of her response came not just from what she said but how she said it. There was no dramatic hand gesture, no shouting match, no name-calling. There was just raw, unfiltered dignity. Jasmine Crockett, a woman who has spent her life breaking through barriers, decided to respond to an insult about her freedom by embodying the very essence of it. Her calm dismantled the venom in Whoopi's comment. It flipped the narrative entirely. Suddenly, the line, "freedom looks bad on you," sounded less like a clever insult and more like an embarrassing admission of bias. Whoopi, known for her bold and often controversial opinions, looked strangely unsettled. It was as though she didn't expect Crockett to handle it like that. Like so many before her, she probably assumed that a woman like Jasmine, young and black, would respond emotionally. But Crockett's calmness was her power, and it revealed the weakness in Whoopi's attack. The internet erupted. Within minutes, social media was ablaze with clips of the exchange. Memes began flooding in, but they weren't mocking Jasmine, they were rallying behind her. On platforms like X, Instagram, and TikTok, hashtags like #FreedomLooksGood and #CrockettClapsBack began trending. People from all walks of life, across race, gender, and politics, came forward to praise her for her composure and message. Even commentators who often disagree with Crockett politically had to admit, that moment was iconic. The conversation quickly turned into a larger debate about how society views outspoken black women in power. Why did Whoopi feel emboldened to say what she did? Why does confidence in women of color get mistaken for arrogance? Why is strength seen as defiance when it comes in the form of a black voice? Crockett's response ignited a wave of discussions in newsrooms, college campuses, dinner tables, and barbershops. She wasn't just defending herself anymore, she was opening a nationwide conversation. Her calm response became a case study in how to own your narrative when the world is trying to write it for you. Political pundits took notice. Academic thinkers began writing op-eds. Young women started quoting her online. She had become more than a representative, she had become a cultural force. And to think, all of that started not with a speech, but with a moment of restraint. It wasn't long before Jasmine Crockett took to social media herself. In a brief but powerful post, she wrote, "Freedom doesn't have to look familiar to be valid. I wear it how I earned it." That line alone sent shockwaves through both the political left and right. On one side, there was admiration. On the other, there was discomfort, but no one could ignore her. She had managed to take an insult and transform it into a national reckoning on how America perceives freedom when it's worn by someone outside the mold of old white male power. She had challenged not just Whoopi Goldberg but the entire legacy of gatekeeping in American media. Journalists began digging into the context behind Whoopi's statement. Was it jealousy? A generational divide? A misunderstanding of Crockett's political style? Or was it something deeper? Something darker? Some speculated that Whoopi had grown uncomfortable with younger black women taking center stage in spaces she once dominated. Others suggested it was simply an old-school way of policing black identity, the kind of internalized policing that gets passed down through generations. But regardless of motive, one thing was clear: Jasmine Crockett wasn't shaken. In fact, she looked even more centered than ever before. Later that week, Crockett appeared on a separate news outlet. When asked directly about the incident, she didn't shy away. "Look," she said, "I respect Whoopi for her legacy, but that doesn't mean I'll tolerate being undermined. You don't get to tell a black woman how freedom should look on her. That's not empowerment, that's control." Her words hit home for many women across the country who had experienced similar microaggressions, from bosses, colleagues, even family. Once again, Crockett had shown that her calm didn't mean weakness, it meant strategy. She was playing a long game, one that wasn't about winning arguments, but changing the culture. Meanwhile, Whoopi's silence on the matter grew louder. She offered no public apology, no clarification, no remorse. That in itself became part of the story. It exposed how even powerful women of color can fall into the trap of perpetuating the very systems they claim to fight against. The double standard was exposed. Had someone like Bill Maher or Tucker Carlson said what Whoopi did, there would have been outrage from the left. But because it came from a fellow black woman, many tried to dismiss it as a misunderstanding. Crockett wasn't having that. Her approach was firm but forgiving. She didn't call for cancellation. She called for introspection. That's what set her apart. As the days rolled on, the incident didn't fade, it grew. Schools began discussing it in classrooms. News anchors referenced it during broadcasts. Churches mentioned it in sermons. It had become one of those rare political cultural moments that transcend the screen. And Jasmine Crockett, without even trying to, had become a symbol. A symbol of what freedom really looks like when it stands tall, even under attack. A symbol of black womanhood unapologetically claiming space. A symbol of power cloaked in calm. Eventually, support began pouring in from surprising corners. Some older civil rights leaders applauded Crockett for her restraint. Activists tweeted their solidarity. Even celebrities who had previously remained silent stepped forward. Viola Davis, Ava DuVernay, and Kerry Washington posted words of admiration. The message was clear: Crockett had tapped into something sacred, and all of it had come from a single moment, a moment that could have ended in chaos, but instead became a defining act of grace under fire. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. In a time when outrage dominates headlines, when screaming often replaces substance, Jasmine Crockett reminded the world of something rare: composure is power, intelligence is power, calm is power, and when wielded by someone with purpose and principle, that power becomes unstoppable. It dismantles prejudice, it exposes hypocrisy, it creates change. Even her political opponents had to admit the brilliance of her move. Quietly, some Republicans privately acknowledged that Jasmine had handled the situation better than many of their own would have. They respected her not because she backed down, but because she didn't need to escalate to prove her strength. That kind of control, that kind of centered energy, terrified some, because it signaled a new kind of leadership. A leadership that couldn't be baited, couldn't be thrown off balance, and wouldn't apologize for existing in a place of power. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win the moment, she redefined it. She walked away with more than applause. She walked away with moral authority. She became proof that strength isn't always the loudest person in the room. Sometimes, it's the one who lets others talk themselves into shame, and that's exactly what she did. If this powerful moment moved you and you believe voices like Jasmine Crockett's deserve to be heard, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. These are the moments that shape our culture, and together, we can make sure the right stories are told.